Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Bold and Beautiful. Today, RJ stood firm in the doorway of Forrester Creations as Electra's pulsing voice echoed in Will's cognizance, her concession slicing through the air like glass, and in that single twinkle everything shattered, because Will had no way imagined the woman he trusted further than anyone would admit she had been intimately feeding information to RJ, helping him undermine Will's systems, manipulate meetings, and indeed deflect designs to profit Ridge's son. And as Will's face drained of color, his eyes locked onto Electra with an admixture of heartache and unbelief, RJ stepped forward with a calm confidence that burned like energy on a fire, declaring that Electra hadn't betrayed Will out of malignancy but out of verity, because Will had been playing a dangerous game of ambition that hovered the entire Forrester heritage, and Electra, torn between love and heart, chose to cover the company indeed if it meant losing him. And Will's voice cracked as he demanded to know how long it had been going on, how numerous late nights, how numerous rumored calls, how numerous falsehoods were wrapped in the kisses he allowed were real, and Electra collapsed into gashes, confessing it started when she eavesdropped while planning to edge RJ out, to make him look unskillful in front of Ridge and Brooke, and she couldn't let that be, not when RJ had worked so hard to earn his place, and Will staggered back as if struck, his pride screaming louder than his pain, criminating RJ of manipulating Electra, of using her heart as an armament. But RJ fired back that Will had been using everyone, indeed his own last name, to dominate Forrester Creations, and that this wasn't about vengeance, it was about survival, because the company was tearing itself piecemeal, and Will was getting exactly what he claimed to hate. And in that charged moment, Ridge stormed in, followed by Brooke and Katie, drawn by raised voices and emotional fallout, and when Ridge realized what had happened, he saw in Will's eyes the same hunger for control that had formerly driven generations of Forresters into ruin, and he advised him that ambition without fidelity was bane, and Will snapped that fidelity had no way defended anyone in this family, that secrets and favoritism ruled Forrester, and he was done playing second to anyone. Indeed RJ, and Electra, blubbing, reached for Will, telling him she still loved him, that everything she did was to stop him from getting someone he'd detest, but Will quailed, telling her love should no way feel like treason, and in that moment commodity inside him hardened, a resoluteness darker than a head, as he pledged that if RJ wanted war, he'd give him one, and he walked out, leaving Electra shattered and RJ shaken, realizing the battle between them had just come particular, and as days passed, Will still aligned himself with important investors, oohing rumors about RJ's inexperience, planting dubieties in the board's minds, while RJ worked lifelessly to prove himself, staying late, refining collections, supported by Electra who now carried the weight of guilt like a scar, and every regard between RJ and Electra reminded her of what she had lost, while Will watched from a distance, his heartache morphing into strategy, and when the coming fashion show arrived, it came the ultimate battleground, with Will unveiling a rival line backed by outside capital, hanging to siphon attention and prestige from Forrester. And as cameras flashed and models walked, whispers gurgled through the crowd, RJ versus Will. A family feud on public display, and confidentially Electra brazened Will one last time, contending with him to stop before everything burned. But Will looked at her with eyes that formerly held love and now held only sword, telling her she chose her side, and now he'd chosen his future. And when RJ's design stunned the followership with bold invention, Will's jaw tensed, because he realized too late that RJ wasn't the naive heir at law he imagined, but a rival born of the same fire, and as applause thundered, Ridge placed a proud hand on RJ's shoulder, sealing the emblematic palm, yet Will's boo suggested that this was only round one, because in the world of the bold and the beautiful, love no way dies still, treason no way ends fairly, and every concession becomes the spark for an indeed lesser storm. Will did not sleep that night. Every moment was haunted by Electra's confession. The words kept playing in his mind over and over. She said, "I did it to protect Forrester Creations." He clenched his fists hard that his nails dug into his palms. He imagined RJ smirking in his office. RJ was probably happy that he knew something Will did not. Every move Will thought he was making in secret RJ already knew about it. RJ had told someone Will trusted. When the sun came up, Will went to the company. He was very angry. He was calm, on the outside. Nobody had ever seen him like this before. He was usually a person, but now he seemed cold. Every person he passed felt the tension. They sensed that something big was happening. Even Ridge might not be able to control it. When Will went into RJ's office, RJ looked up. He seemed calm and a little happy. It was like he was daring Will to say something. Then Will spoke. His voice was low and angry. He said, "You think you are clever, do you not, RJ?" And RJ raised an eyebrow. "I think I'm prepared." And the words hung in the air like a challenge, and Will slammed his hand on RJ's desk, papers flying, contracts scattering, the air thick with the scent of conflict, and Electra appeared, looking fragile, her eyes wide with fear, trying to intervene. "Will, please, don't let this destroy us." But Will barely noticed her. His mind consumed with strategy, betrayal, and vengeance, and he stormed out to the boardroom, where Rich, Brooke, and Katie had gathered after rumors of the confrontation had reached them, and Will addressed the room with the authority of someone who had been wounded but not broken, laying out a plan to protect the company from RJ's supposed manipulations, planting seeds of doubt about RJ's leadership abilities, subtly highlighting RJ's youth, his impulsive decisions, and the ways he might jeopardize Forrester's reputation. And Ridge listened, torn between fatherly love and corporate duty, while Brooke's eyes flickered nervously between the two men, sensing the emotional war brewing, and Katie, ever ambitious, saw opportunity, her mind racing with ways to exploit the tension to her advantage, perhaps gaining leverage over both RJ and Will. And in the midst of this, Electra followed Will quietly, her heart breaking as she saw the man she loved transform before her eyes into someone she hardly recognized, hardened by betrayal, determined to outmaneuver RJ no matter the cost. And as the week progressed, the tension escalated, with each encounter between Will and RJ becoming more heated, more public, drawing whispers and speculation from employees, clients, and socialites alike. And every time Electra tried to mediate, she was met with cold detachment from Will, who now viewed her actions as a betrayal that could never be fully forgiven. And even as she tried to explain that her loyalty had been to the company, not to RJ personally, Will's mind twisted it into a personal affront, feeding the fire of his growing resentment. And RJ, seeing Will's transformation, realized that his rival's wrath was now a force to be reckoned with, and he began planning counter-moves, subtle, intelligent, aimed at undermining Will's initiatives while simultaneously demonstrating his own value to Ridge and Brooke. And the drama spilled beyond the walls of Forrester Creations, into fashion shows, media coverage, and even high society parties, where whispers of RJ vs Will were on everyone's lips, and every appearance by Will or RJ became a battlefield of glances, smirks, and veiled threats, with Electra caught painfully in the middle, torn between the man she loved and the man she had protected. And then came the moment that escalated everything further. Will, in a move no one anticipated, decided to leverage a secret from RJ's past, information about a failed project, mismanaged funds, and a betrayal of his own, and he presented it to Ridge and the board in a way that made RJ appear reckless, inexperienced, and manipulative. And RJ's shock was palpable, his confident facade cracking for the first time as the board's eyes scrutinized him, questioning his judgment and loyalty. And Electra's heart sank as she saw RJ falter under the pressure, knowing that her attempts to protect both men had inadvertently caused harm to the one she had tried to shield. And in that very same moment, Ridge stepped forward, his voice booming, reminding everyone that family, legacy, and Forrester Creations itself were at stake. And he chastised both Will and RJ, warning them that if their feud continued unchecked, it could destroy everything their family had built. And Brooke, ever the peacemaker but also a force in her own right, tried to calm the storm, urging both men to remember the company's mission and to rise above personal grievances. But her words fell mostly on deaf ears, because Will's heart had hardened completely, his mind now calculating every possible way to undermine RJ while still maintaining a facade of corporate responsibility. And RJ, meanwhile, was quietly planning a counterattack, refining his designs, seeking allies among younger designers, and even enlisting Electra in ways that forced her to make moral compromises she never thought she would face. And every late night in the studio became a crucible of tension, creativity, and strategy, with Electra's loyalties constantly tested. And as Fashion Week approached, the stakes could not have been higher, with Will preparing a surprise reveal of his own, a daring collection that he claimed would redefine Forrester's image, while RJ planned a launch that would highlight innovation, boldness, and a family legacy that he argued Will had misunderstood. And the night of the showcase arrived, electric with anticipation, cameras flashing, critics murmuring, socialites whispering, and Rich, Brooke, and Katie on the sidelines, their faces a mixture of pride, anxiety, and curiosity, and as Will's models hit the runway, the crowd gasped at the daring designs, a mixture of classic elegance and modern audacity, but just as the applause began to swell, RJ's line followed, and the contrast was immediate, striking, and undeniable, a bold declaration. That RJ had both vision and heart, and the audience erupted in approval, and Will's jaw tightened, anger mixing with admiration, because he realized that RJ's talent was real, and that Electra's secret efforts had indeed made a difference, and backstage, tensions boiled over, Will confronting Electra, accusing her of betrayal yet again, while RJ attempted to mediate, his own emotions swirling, and Ridge stepped in, placing a hand on Will's shoulder, reminding him that sometimes leadership required compromise, that family required forgiveness, and that in this high-stakes world, enemies could become allies if the heart was willing, and Brooke, sensing the emotional tipping point, whispered to Electra that perhaps the only way to save both men, and herself, was to reveal a truth even more shocking than her initial betrayal, and Electra, trembling, nodded, realizing that the next confession could either heal or utterly destroy the Forrester dynasty, and as the night wound down, with cameras off and the crowd dispersed, the three of them, Will, RJ, and Electra, found themselves in a quiet room, tension so thick it could be cut with a knife, and Electra, swallowing her fear, prepared to reveal a secret that would shake everything they thought they knew about each other. Because in the bold and the beautiful, love, betrayal, and ambition were never simple, and one revelation could ignite a war, spark forbidden romance, or collapse a family empire in the blink of an eye, and as she opened her mouth, the room seemed to hold its collective breath, and Will, RJ, and even Ridge leaned in, knowing that whatever came next would change the dynamics of their relationships forever, that Electra's words would dictate who would rise, who would fall, who would betray, and who would forgive, and as she spoke, the story unfolded like a hurricane, revealing secrets, lies, and desires that had been simmering beneath the surface for years, and by the end of the night, nothing would ever be the same, because in this world of power, passion, and legacy, the battles were never just about fashion, they were about family, heart, and the dangerous intersections where love and ambition collide. Electra's secret was like a big weight hanging in the air ready to fall and change everything. Her voice was very quiet. The room was filled with tension. Will's eyes got smaller. His body got stiff with anger and shock. The secret Electra had kept hidden for a time was very bad, much worse than Will could have thought. It was not just about RJ, it was about something that made Will question everything he thought he knew about his family, the company his family owned, and himself. As Electra spoke, her words came out all mixed up with fear and desperation. She explained that someone they all trusted had been secretly working with others, making plans behind the scenes. This had changed the way Forrester Creations did business. It was a big deal. Will felt like the ground had been pulled out from under him and his hands were shaking as he tried to understand what was happening. RJ looked shocked, angry, and also a little happy because he had known some of what was going on but not everything. Now everything had changed, and the fight between him and Will was not about personal issues, it was about everything. Ridge saw that things were getting out of control, so he stepped in, said in a firm voice, "Enough. This family has survived decades of betrayal, but if we let this continue, there will be nothing left of us." And Brooke, ever the voice of reason but also fraught with fear for her own heart, tried to mediate, her words flowing in a desperate attempt to stop the tide of rage and mistrust that threatened to drown everyone. And Katie, ever calculating, remained silent, her eyes gleaming with the kind of ambition that saw opportunity in chaos, already planning how she could exploit the tension to cement her influence over the company and perhaps even over Ridge himself. And as Will absorbed Electra's confession, he realized with horror that her actions, though intended to protect the company, had undermined him, eroded the trust he had thought untouchable, and exposed vulnerabilities that RJ could, and would, exploit. And in that moment, Will's mind snapped into overdrive, devising a plan that was as dangerous as it was brilliant, one that would reclaim control, assert dominance, and force RJ to confront the consequences of every secret move, every whispered strategy, every subtle maneuver in the corporate chess game that had been unfolding behind the Forrester walls, and he decided that the only way to regain the upper hand was to hit RJ where it hurt most: reputation, alliances, and the very foundation of his confidence. And as Will began his calculated approach, quietly calling in favors, reminding old allies of RJ's missteps, and subtly planting seeds of doubt in everyone's mind. RJ was simultaneously trying to anticipate the next strike, consulting Electra in whispered conferences late at night, plotting every design, every launch, every public appearance with the precision of a surgeon, all the while trying to maintain the moral high ground even as he knew that Will would stop at nothing, that the man he once admired and trusted could now be his fiercest adversary, and Electra, caught in the crossfire, felt the weight of guilt crush her chest, because while she had acted out of love, loyalty, and a sense of duty, the outcome was spiraling into something far more destructive than she had ever intended, and every glance between her and Will was now charged with unspeakable tension, every conversation layered with suspicion, regret, and longing, and as weeks passed, the feud escalated, spilling into public events where models, clients, and media vultures began to sense the storm, capturing every flinch, every glare, every subtle act of sabotage and whisper, amplifying it into headlines that screamed Forrester family feud, Will vs RJ, and social media erupted with speculation, opinion, and even fan wars, pitting supporters of Will against supporters of RJ, as if the personal vendetta had become a national spectacle, and backstage, the tension reached near hysterical levels, with Electra trying to mediate, begging both men to see reason, to remember that the company, the family, and even their own hearts were at stake, but Will, hardened beyond recognition, rejected any counsel, insisting that Electra's betrayal had left a scar too deep for compromise, while RJ, fueled by a mixture of vindication and hurt, refused to back down, knowing that yielding now would signal weakness to both the board and the public, and Ridge, seeing the chaos unfold, realized that the legacy of Forrester Creations was teetering on the edge of collapse, and that unless someone could somehow intervene and restore balance, the family he had nurtured for decades could implode under the weight of ambition, love, and betrayal, and Brooke, sensing the emotional tipping point, began to explore a risky strategy of her own, attempting to subtly shift Electra's loyalties back toward Will, not out of manipulation, but in a desperate bid to preserve the family and the company from total annihilation, while Katie watched. All of this with keen eyes, understanding that in the chaos lay her chance to rise, to seize control, to play both sides in a way that could ensure her influence and secure her own power within the empire. And as the next fashion launch approached, tensions were already at a fever pitch, with models, designers, and staff nervously anticipating confrontation, every step backstage a dance of strategy, whispers, and subtle provocations, and when the lights hit the runway, the first wave of models showcased Will's designs, sleek, daring, and undeniably bold, earning applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the theater. But before Will could savor victory, RJ's models took the stage, revealing designs so audacious, innovative, and emotionally charged that they drew gasps of awe and admiration, and suddenly the rivalry became not only a contest of ambition, but a battle of creativity, vision, and public perception. And the crowd buzzed with speculation, photographers capturing every tense glance, every subtle smile, every sign of intimidation or triumph, while backstage, Electra's heart raced, knowing that whatever happened now could tip the scales forever. And as the applause thundered, Will's lips tightened, his pride wounded even as he recognized RJ's undeniable talent, and RJ, sensing his own rising stature, felt a surge of confidence tempered only by the fear of Will's next move, and then, as if fate itself demanded escalation, Ridge stepped forward during the post-show debrief, his voice echoing with authority, warning that the feud had gone far enough, that personal vendettas could no longer dictate the course of the company, and that family, loyalty, and the integrity of Forrester Creations must come first, and Brooke, standing beside him, nodded in solemn agreement, adding that forgiveness was sometimes the only way to survive, while Katie, in her usual strategic silence, began plotting the next subtle move, considering how she might exploit cracks in alliances, hidden resentments, and the fragile hearts of the players involved to secure her own place in the hierarchy, and Will, however, was undeterred, silently vowing that he would not yield, that his vision, his honor, and his claim to the company would be defended at all costs, while RJ, equally determined, began planning a surprise launch, leveraging Electra's insights to create a collection that would be so breathtaking, so unexpected, that it would redefine public opinion, challenge Will's authority, and assert his own claim to the Forrester legacy in a way that was both strategic and emotionally charged, and Electra, torn between love, loyalty, and her conscience, became a key player in this high-stakes game, navigating dangerous waters as she tried to protect both men, while recognizing that